news of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag in the back that says USA.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am your host, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. A great week for the Tea Party, a great week for conservatives. Mitt Romney, the establishment candidate, declared that he will not run in 2016. He said that he put a great deal of thought into the decision, and ultimately he decided that perhaps some of his critics were right. A fresh face would be better for the GOP. Hallelujah. Well, thank you, Mitt. We certainly didn't need you to try one more time. This would have been your third attempt to become president of the United States. And frankly, if you couldn't defeat Barack Obama in 2012, when he had no record, when the economy was very weak, then when would you be able to defeat him? To me, it seemed very clear. He had his shot. He was done. And it shocked me that he even bothered to set up an exploratory committee. It was obvious that he was seriously flirting with it, but there was a lot of pushback. Many people came out, people like Donald Trump, for example, said, well, he choked during the election. And even his co-chair this week, prior to Romney's announcement, has said he's having a bad week, and the co-chair of his previous campaign, and that perhaps he should not run. Listen to this.
If he decided to throw his hat in the ring, would you be a supporter of his?
I'm not decided yet, but I'm not happy, frankly, with the way that he's chosen to re-enter presidential politics, and I think his friends need to be honest with him about that. He's a great man. He would be a great president, but there's not a lot of good precedent for somebody losing the election and coming back 4 years later and becoming the nominee. Thomas Dewey is the best example in our party. It didn't work out too well. And unfortunately, I think that Governor Romney had two increasingly good years after losing the presidency, and now he's had one pretty bad week.
And indeed he did. He had a horrible week where he seemed like he was whining, where he seemed like he was stuck in 2012. And frankly, he seemed like as much as he tried, he does not have fresh ideas to offer. He doesn't have anything new. In fact, were we to ask him this question, what has changed for you from 2012 to now? What factors are different that could possibly render you a candidate that will win? There's no answer to that question. Nothing has changed. And what was so horrible about this week? Well, it looked like the Romney that reemerged as he was exploring his bid was the same Romney that had failed in 2012. There was no difference. He made another, what I consider, a dreadful gaffe in a speech that he delivered in Mississippi, where, guess what he emphasized? He emphasized the one thing that the Democrats had pounded him over throughout the 2012 campaign, his wealth. And they had said that he is out of touch with the suffering poor, the needs of the working class, the needs of the middle class. And what does he do? In a speech, he's trying to be funny. He's trying to basically take on this criticism head on. But instead, he seems exactly like the Democrats peg him to be. Totally out of touch. Listen to this.
You may have heard that I'm thinking of running for president again. That's my brother Scott. Put it down, will you, Scott? I don't miss the adoring press. I don't miss over 300 nights a year in a motel room. I'm not even thinking about getting rich from the speaking fees after I leave office. As you no doubt heard, I'm already rich.
Why would he have to say that? First of all, it's not funny. It seems like he's rubbing his wealth in people's faces at a time in which so many people are still struggling. This comment was just like Hillary Clinton saying that she and her husband emerged from those White House years dead broke. It's a tone-deaf comment. He's trying to make light of the fact that he is filthy rich, and instead it backfires because it's not humorous, it's not satirical, it has no greater point, it doesn't connect with anybody. It's just bringing attention to a deficit in your campaign. And that wasn't the only mistake. He was also asked a lot of questions by reporters while he was in Mississippi this week. And at one point he said, it would be nice if people who run for office, that their leadership experience, what they've accomplished in life, would be a bigger part of what people are focused on. But it's not. Mostly it's what you say, and what you do is a lot more important than just what you say. Well, this sounds like sour grapes. This sounds like he's whining about 2012. This sounds like he's stuck in the past. But more important, yes, he has leadership experience. But also what he said sunk him during his campaign. He made a very callous comment about 47% of the American people is not what he's focused on, those who are dependent on government programs. That was a very callous comment. So that sunk him. His words cost him, but also his record cost him. What part of his record? His record of constant flip-flopping. Who is the real Mitt Romney? What does Mitt Romney stand for? What unbending principle, what core principle will he never violate? He was a pro-choicer who became a pro-lifer. During the GOP primaries, he decided that he was going to take a tough stand on immigration. And he said that people should even, quote unquote, self-deport. And then shortly after the failure to win in 2012, he came out saying that the Republicans should go ahead with comprehensive immigration reform. And this latest flip-flop would have destroyed him had he continued, because this would be a flip-flop on a major issue in a long line of flip-flops. You remember the famous, infamous, one might say, words that his campaign manager had said after the GOP primaries in the previous campaign. He said, well, we're not too concerned about what Mitt is saying now because he's going to be like an Etch-a-Sketch. When we get to the general campaign, we can just revisit all those policies. The Etch-a-Sketch candidate, meaning Mitt will be whatever you want him to be. At the end of the day, this is what is plaguing him more than any other of the knocks against him. It is true that the Democrats outwitted him in the sense that they pegged him as a callous businessman who bankrupts companies and outsources jobs. And although so much of that was based on lies, the problem was in 2012 that Mitt, as he now admits, he was focusing so much on helping entrepreneurs. And the language of helping entrepreneurs is very different than helping folks out there who need jobs. And so he admits that that was a mistake. He also admitted recently in a speech that he delivered that he should have done a lot more outreach to minorities, and that you've got to do outreach to minorities not just when you're running, but over a long course of time, over a long period of time. Well, listen, Mitt, I mean, even by this argument that you're presenting now, outreach to minorities starting in 2015, when you want to be president in 2016, that's not a long stretch of time. So he didn't seem to have anything fresh, new to offer. In the speech that he delivered in Mississippi, he talked about that his campaign, if he should run, was going to be focused on foreign policy. And he has many good points to make on foreign policy. And after that, it was going to be focused on job creation and helping the poor. So this time, Mitt was going to present himself as much more compassionate, have some kind of vision to help the poor in this country. It doesn't matter how you slice it. The Democrats were going to take that clip of him saying that those who are dependent on government don't need his help. They were going to play it ad nauseum. They were going to play ad nauseum the whole narrative that they played in 2012, that he outsourced jobs and bankrupted companies. And he really doesn't seem to have a rebuttal to that. And on top of all of this, if you add the fact that the GOP base is just not enthralled with him, there's no enthusiasm for him. So many people stayed home in 2012, and the same phenomenon would have repeated itself going forward into 2016. There's just no path to victory with Mitt Romney leading the GOP. So, mercifully, thankfully, he made the decision that he was just going to gracefully bow out. Now, the latest speculation is that he might form an alliance with some other GOP establishment candidate. Remember that he had a meeting with Jeb Bush, a private meeting, in which it was reported that no deal was struck. Well, 1 week later, he bows out of the race. We've got to ask ourselves questions about that. Was there some kind of a deal? We also know that he's going to meet with Chris Christie. Is he going to make a deal with Chris Christie? It appears that although Mitt Romney is out of the running for the lead for 2016, he's certainly going to continue to be a power broker, and we'll wait and see who he throws his support to. Will it be Jeb Bush? Will it be Chris Christie? Will it be somebody else? It remains to be seen. Remember that his relationship with Chris Christie was a little bit frosty last time around because he believed, and many of his staffers believed, that Chris Christie was very egotistical in endorsing him at the previous Republican National Convention, that the speech he delivered was all about Chris Christie and not about Mitt Romney. So it seems that Mitt has issues with both men. Chris Christie, the past they have together. With Jeb Bush, there's speculation that perhaps he won't completely support him because his statement as to why he's bowing out goes on and on about a fresh face. And we all know that Jeb Bush is not really considered a fresh face, certainly not a fresh name, not the Bush name. So what is Mitt thinking in terms of what he's going to do next? We don't know. But the good news is that an establishment candidate that had no chance to win in 2016 has gracefully bowed out of the race. And he made this decision because his many people who previously worked for him told him, analyzing the tea leaves and looking at his recent performance, that he was just not going to be able to rise to the challenge. And I think it's a big victory for conservatives, for the Tea Party, because it gives us a greater chance to hone in on whoever the establishment candidate is. It's going to be one of them that's going to emerge very powerfully, Jeb Bush or probably Chris Christie. It'll be one of those two. And as soon as we see the direction that either of them are going to take, we can hone in all our ammo, all our energy, all our fire on one establishment candidate that hopefully we can defeat. The challenge that we face going forward is, are we going to be as disciplined in the Tea Party and amongst conservatives to quickly root out those who have no chance? Because the establishment has done that right now. By getting Romney out of the way, they're being shrewd. They want to make sure that they have one powerful candidate that they're going to rally behind. We face the danger of splintering ourselves amongst many candidates. And if we have any chance of overtaking an establishment Republican, we're going to have to be very disciplined, make a decision quite quickly about who we're going to rally against so that we can rally against that individual that represents the conservative voice, the Tea Party voice, and then use all our influence to knock out the establishment candidate. For now, we will take our victories when we can get them. Mitt Romney, the establishment candidate who failed us not once but twice, is out of the running, and we are so grateful.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Screaming out louder, keep it on the floor, bring out the fire.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. Well, this week, one of Obama's nominees to replace Eric Holder as Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, was in the hot seat being scrutinized by members of Congress, probing her positions, trying to ascertain whether or not she is suited to replace the Attorney General that is resigning, Eric Holder. Well, Loretta Lynch is a very well-spoken woman. The problem is that her ideas are wacky. They are not just left-wing, but radically left-wing. And she made statements that are of grave concern. It is clear beyond the shadow of a doubt that Republicans, both in the House and in the Senate, must vigorously oppose this nomination. The Attorney General has a primary responsibility, and that responsibility is to uphold the Constitution. It is to uphold the laws of the land. Loretta Lynch was asked point blank, "What do you think of Obama's executive amnesty?" And she replied that she has no problem with it, in essence, that she thinks that that was a judicious use of his discretion, that it is within the executive's purview to be able to make such decisions about who is deported and who is not. This, of course, goes contrary to the very statements that Obama had made when he said over 20 times that such behavior is illegal and unconstitutional. So Loretta Lynch sat there with a straight face, making a case that she's going to defend the laws of the land, when what she's really saying is that she's prepared to support a president that is breaking the laws of the land, and she's not going to stand in his way. The Attorney General is supposed to represent the interests of the people, and it's supposed to be part of the checks and balances that we have in our Constitution. The Attorney General is supposed to correct wrongdoing, is supposed to launch investigations to ensure that no crimes are being committed. Now, we know that Eric Holder has covered up the crimes of the administration. He's tried to block Congress from properly investigating crimes that they know are taking place. So the test here is, was Loretta Lynch going to be truly an independent woman, stand her own ground, represent the office at its highest level, represented without allegiance to party or president? And she failed miserably in that test because she said that she essentially supports the president when he decides to go it alone and break the laws of the land. So essentially, what has she said? She is going to be another rubber stamp for President Obama. And guess what? That's why he chose her. He obviously has an agreement with Eric Holder. You rubber stamp the decisions that I make. You protect me, protect my interests, and I'll take good care of you. And it seems that the same quid pro quo is going to repeat itself with this Attorney General. And of course, if you look at it from the point of view of a president who is scandal-ridden, who needs to continue to cover up, of course he's got to present there a lackey. And that's what she's going to be if she's confirmed. Nothing other than a lackey. But what's even worse about this woman is not only is she not going to do the basics of her job, which is uphold the law, she even said that those who come here who are illegal also have a quote-unquote right to work. That is an extreme position. In this country, in a free market society, we do not believe that anybody has a right to work. We do not believe that citizens have a quote-unquote a right to work. We obviously believe that it is desirable for people to work. We want everybody to work. But it's not a right. It's not a fundamental human right. It is a privilege. It is the product of a prosperous society. That's why we defend the free market. If you say that everybody has a right to work, then what that means is if that person doesn't have work, can't find work, then the government has to provide work for the individual. That's what that means. That is plain and simple socialism. It is not free market capitalism. So, Loretta Lynch doesn't seem to understand the nature of the society that we currently have, which is not a socialist democracy, albeit the president's trying to turn it into one. It's a free market society. So we not only believe that citizens don't have a right to work, we certainly do not believe that the undocumented have a right to work. If you enter this country illegally, you have violated the basic laws of the land, and you have no rights. And certainly you have no right to work. So what does this mean? Not only is she going to allow the president to go forward with his executive amnesty, but she's going to turn a blind eye to all employers who are hiring illegals without papers, which means that America is being turned into a free-for-all. That's what this nominee stands for. America, the dumping ground. America, the society without rules and regulations. And it is crystal clear that every member of Congress should say, not as a matter of politics, this is not political. This is not a matter of ideology. This is not a matter of party. As a matter of mere competence, she is not qualified to be the Attorney General. The Attorney General, job description 101, uphold the laws of the United States of America. This woman is saying, I will not uphold the laws of the United States of America. You know what? Get up and get out. Listen to Sessions, a member of Congress, who says clearly what I am saying. The Republicans have to take a stand against her.
Congress is not a potted plant. It needs to defend itself. It has certain powers that it should use to block this wrongdoing. One of those powers is confirmation power. So why would we want to confirm someone who's going to continue to execute an unlawful, unconstitutional policy? One of the other powers will soon be on the floor is the power of the purse. And Congress has no responsibility to fund an executive program that they oppose as a matter of policy, and in addition, is illegal and unconstitutional. So Congress should not give money to the executive branch to execute a plan that's unlawful. And especially when the American people, by a substantial majority, oppose what the president's doing. So I just baffled by the president's assertions of power that are so baseless.
Exactly. And so you have a few members of Congress who are standing up saying, we Republicans, if our word means anything, we have to block this nominee and we have to ensure that we defund any attempt to provide documents to those who have broken the laws and are in this country undocumented and illegal. You are listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, upholding values that will never die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Well, that traitor, that person in a very low place, Bowe Bergdahl, is back in the news. And the issue is, why has this man not yet been court-martialed? The Army did an investigation. That investigation has been ready. It has been completed for months. And yet, there is no decision on his fate. The news broke this week that the military wants to take some kind of disciplinary action against him. And yet the Pentagon tried to squash all these stories and say, no decision has been made. And there's no pressure on the individual who is to make the decision. There's no pressure at all from the White House to make any decision that isn't really ultimately a decision that he wants to make. No pressure at all. Well, it's patently obvious what is going on here. Bowe Bergdahl was exchanged for 5 Taliban commanders. And this week, news broke that one of those prisoners who was released actually made contact with the Taliban. Remember, they told us that the 5 prisoners who were released were going to be watched by the Qatari government and that we had nothing to fear, that they would make sure that these individuals were not going to simply rejoin the war effort against the United States. And now we know that one of these individuals made contact with the Taliban. Now, why on earth would they be doing that? Obviously, that person wants to rejoin the battle. They didn't say which of the 5. So the president made a colossal mistake when he released 5 Taliban commanders for Bowe Bergdahl. Bowe Bergdahl was quickly deemed by members who served with him to be a deserter. This broke all across the press. And they've been trying to keep the story quiet. This is a typical tactic in Washington. Delay until passions are cooled and then make a decision when everybody's attention is focused on something else. And yet they are stunned because for this particular story, the American people will not relent. Every time it surfaces in the news, it blows up and everybody starts talking about it. Why? Well, it's very clear why. Because 9 American soldiers lost their lives searching for Bowe Bergdahl. He has blood on his hands, and he needs to be held accountable for that. And yet, if the military holds him accountable for that, they're basically going to humiliate the commander-in-chief and render his prisoner swap an utter joke. A colossal blunder as big as withdrawing from Iraq without sufficient American troops left behind. Another foreign policy disaster. So the administration doesn't quite know what to do. Of course they are pressuring the military to at best simply slap Bowe Bergdahl on the wrist and let's bury this story. But those in the military, they know what is at stake. You cannot allow a deserter to go unpunished. You will destroy the very essence of military discipline. Colonel Ralph Peters rightly explained what is at stake for the military and for the White House in this decision. Roll it.
No, that's absolute bull. I mean, this guy...
I'm just asking a question.
No, come on. Sean, I've got to watch my language on the
Stockholm
air.
Syndrome and PTSD are real.
Yeah, well, okay, but that's after the fact.
That's bull.
He didn't have PTSD. He didn't have Stockholm System in his unit, for God's sakes. Look, what we have here is very, very clear. It's damnably clear. You have the White House, which doesn't understand why this is a big deal. I mean, he just deserted, right? Wouldn't anybody do that? And they just want to protect the president. And they are pressuring the Army to whitewash this. And they don't understand that for the military, those who went before, retirees like me, those on active duty, this is a powerful matter of, as you heard from that young soldier, of precedent and principle. If you let Bergdahl walk, and it's not about this pathetic little creep, Bergdahl, but it's about the principle. If you let him walk with full pay and benefits and a promotion, despite overwhelming evidence that he deserted his post in wartime, you make it virtually impossible to prosecute future deserters. Now, in the Army, I'm sure the Army's not perfect. You've got some people craven enough and ambitious enough to cave to the White House, and I'm sure they're arguing the White House's point. But so far, you've got some generals that are showing backbone and saying, no, for the good of the Army, for the good of the military, he has to go through the Article 32 and into court-martial, and the White House is fighting it tooth and nail because they don't give a damn about our military. They just care about this pathetic Puss in Boots president's reputation.
Exactly right. And they are still hemming and hawing. The Pentagon is still trying to bury this. No decision has been made. Every time even a murmur of this surfaces, the American public goes ballistic. And it's not just those family members of the 9 who lost their lives searching for him. What is at stake is the very principle of military discipline. If you can just leave your post, war is impossible. If you can just walk up and go and not be punished, how can you ever win on the battlefield? At this point, President Obama should just back off and let the military do what it needs to do, which is it must inflict a severe penalty on Bowe Bergdahl for having abandoned his post at a moment when his colleagues needed him. And Peter said it just right. You know what was at stake in all this? The administration, they're so mired in their peacenik mentality. They didn't even see how offensive, how grating, how upsetting it is to the American people when we hear about a deserter. For them, it's like, well, you know what? Who wouldn't desert? Who wouldn't desert this war that we're not crazy to fight anywhere? They love this sort of thing. The conscientious objector. They write songs about this sort of thing. They make movies about this sort of thing. You know what the truth of the matter is? Deep down, the White House and the advisors to the president believe that Bowe Bergdahl is a hero. That's right. They really believe that he's some kind of a hero. That's how twisted their ideology is. He's a hero because he sought to reach out to the Taliban. He sought to understand their point of view. He adopted their religion. That's a liberal fantasy. He's not a low-life traitor, deserter that deserves severe punishment. He's their ideal guy. So they're shocked. They're shocked at the public backlash. You remember how Susan Rice went on the Sunday talkies saying, this is a joyous occasion. And the furor was so fierce that even a parade that was scheduled in his own hometown had to be canceled. Well, again, the president is lost in his own la-la land. And we're seeing more and more cracks amidst his usual support group, which is the press. Last week, I played a clip about Richard Engel saying, a lot of what the president said in the State of the Union regarding Iraq is just not true. And we now have another clip. Another member of NBC News, one who usually supports the president's actions, Andrea Mitchell, came out very forcefully saying, there are no gains in Syria either. The president's counterterrorism policy is failing. Listen.
There is. I think that what the president proposed in the State of the Union to have an authorization of the use of force will be taken up, and especially with John McCain now as chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, they actually will probably come together on the ground rules. But what is very striking, and this gets to what you and Sam and Evan have been talking about, is that in the President's State of the Union address, he said that there has been progress in rolling back ISIS and in Iraq and Syria. Now, perhaps there has been some progress in Iraq. That's debatable as to whether the Iraqi troops are stood up. They're not ready yet to try to take back Mosul. There certainly has been no progress in Syria. I'm not sure what the president meant to even say that there was progress in Syria, because Aleppo, Raqqa, there's no progress in the cities of Syria. ISIS still controls that territory. And as Evan was just saying, this is a town, Kobani, which is not even completely declared verifiably to be out of ISIS control. And it is on the Turkish-Syrian border. You can walk across. It's not, if it were safe enough to walk across, this is not part of ISIS territory.
Well, not only is there no progress in Syria, as she rightly points out, ISIS is so emboldened. There's a story in Breitbart News where you have a member of ISIS saying, we are going to behead Obama and we're going to turn America into a Muslim nation. Not only are they not being rolled back, they're emboldened. They believe that the future is theirs. They're getting recruits pouring in from around the world. What rollback? You have, again, just as in the Bowe Bergdahl case, a total disconnect from the White House is saying and doing to what is patently obvious to everybody else. Again, here, the president should be forthright with the American people. He could have said something very simple as, we still face a lot of challenges in Syria and Iraq, and we're doing our best to address them. I mean, if you want to minimize American casualties, which is his primary objective, because he keeps saying that he doesn't want any boots on the ground, even though he had to send boots on the ground, well, don't go so far as to make claims that are totally contrary to reality, that even your acolytes in the press cannot, with a straight face, acquiesce to. They have to say, I'm sorry, we cover this day in and day out. We see it with our own eyes. We're on the ground here. What you're saying is simply not true. So the backlash against this president is growing. And there's another area in which I said last week, the president is becoming irrelevant. Events are eclipsing him. The American people are beginning to ignore him. Remember that Congress, Speaker Boehner said he was going to invite Bibi Netanyahu to come and speak to Congress. And you know what this has done? You have people in the press saying, Speaker Boehner made a terrible mistake. He shouldn't have done it. Even though it's within his powers to do so, he shouldn't have done so. It's kind of a slap in the face of the president. Well, you know what this has done for the elections? Bibi, his party, is now soaring in the polls. And why is that? It's because Netanyahu represents a nation that is in the direct line of fire. A line of fire of these radical jihadists who want to destroy them. And he's going to come to the United States to tell Congress to take a firm stand against Iran and not accept this president's policy of negotiating ad nauseum until the Iranians have a nuclear bomb. And the Israeli people are rallying to their leader because they understand that he is defending their basic self-interest. And even though Speaker Boehner has taken a lot of heat from the American press for that invitation, I continue to back him 100%. You will see when Netanyahu comes here, it's going to be a historic moment in American politics. It's going to be a historic speech. He will be the Churchill of our time, defending not only his own nation, but the West itself, because other leaders around the world are filling the power vacuum that now exists. Who out there is the real leader against radical jihad? It's not the commander-in-chief, President Barack Obama. And there are other strong voices emerging from around the world that are filling that void. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never die.
You can tell me when it's over. If the high was worth the pain. Got a long list of ex-lovers. They'll tell you I'm insane. 'Cause you know I love the players. And you love.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Shut up, just shut up, shut up. Shut up, just shut up, shut up. Shut up, just shut up, shut up. Shut it up, just shut up, shut up. Shut up, just shut up, shut up. Shut up, just shut up, shut up. Oh no. Shut up, just shut up, shut up. Shut it up, just shut up, shut up. We try to take it slow.
Well, welcome back. And this is a fan favorite section of the show where we find someone that we all collectively want to tell. We want to say the simple words, just shut up. Well, this week, guess who is trying to present himself as a family man, a doting grandfather? It's Bill Clinton. He was on Rachel Ray's program, and he's talking about his granddaughter, Charlotte. His daughter, Chelsea Clinton, gave birth to Charlotte, and he's gushing over her, as granddads do. And to be honest with you, I found the whole thing distasteful, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, listen to him explain all the things he wants to do with his granddaughter, Charlotte. Roll it.
How are you as a grandpa?
I don't know, but it's a good deal.
Is she a loud baby? Does she have a big voice, or is she a quiet, soft little thing?
She's becoming louder. You know, for the longest time, she didn't laugh or cry. She was like a sponge. She was like, oh my God, something else was taking. It was great. Now, you know, she's kind of moving to music. She'll laugh. She'll cry a little bit if she gets upset.
I love that. She dances. That's good. That's good. You could play a little for her, right?
That's what I'd like to do. I've actually resolved this year to start playing my horn again. Also,
yeah, get back into the music.
Because I want to play to my granddaughter.
Oh, he wants to play to his granddaughter. And then listen to this clip.
Presidents change diapers, or do you veto?
No.
I veto that diaper.
I'd be happy to change diapers, you know, but today, you know, you got to put all that anti-chafe stuff on their rear and do all that.
There's a lot of steps now.
Yeah, there's more moving parts than there was when I was a dad.
But it's okay. Call the diaper service.
It was, you know, clean them off, put the talc on, put the back
on.
And so I loved it.
Oh, please. You know, first of all, I find it really distasteful that he's using his granddaughter as some kind of a prop, you know? It's obvious that he and his wife want to create a lot of good feelings as they head into exploring her run for the nomination. And so the granddaughter is a good way, you know, to make them seem warm and fuzzy. So it's just patently political. It has nothing to do with any true love or affection for his little girl. But you know what really bothered me about this whole thing? To be honest with you, I was thinking, okay, this man is the grandfather to this little girl, Charlotte. And he is no role model whatsoever for this girl. The way that he has abused women throughout his entire life, the way that he has preyed upon them, what kind of a legacy will his granddaughter really perceive of him? She will be told that granddad cheated repeatedly on grandma, that granddad hurt Chelsea Clinton, the mother, you know, the mother of the little girl, over and over again by betraying the family. And then, forgive me, but I had another gruesome thought. If I were Chelsea Clinton, I would never allow Bill Clinton to change my daughter's diapers. And I'm sorry to say this, but I would be very weary of his interaction with her. And you might say, oh, I'm exaggerating. I don't think so. This man is a sexual predator. He is a pervert. He preys on women. He preys on young women. He is essentially out of control. And if he develops a relationship with little Charlotte, as she grows and becomes more and more beautiful, do you trust him? I don't trust him. I don't trust him with any woman. I don't trust him even with a family member. I mean, by and large, today, many folks are weary of men interacting with children, women interacting with children. Everybody's kind of on guard. Everybody's just a little bit more cautious, I can tell you. Everybody's more cautious than we used to be. And certainly hyper cautious if there's any record of sexual perversion. So, to Bill Clinton trying to present himself as somebody that's going to develop this warm, fuzzy relationship with his granddaughter, a relationship that we can in any way admire, honestly, the whole thing makes me sick. You are not a role model as a father. You are not a role model as a grandfather. You were a poor role model as a president. You forced the nation to discuss things in a sexual manner that we didn't want to have to discuss. You preyed on young women like Monica Lewinsky. You basically ruined her life. You also raped women like Juanita Broderick. You sexually harassed others. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So the very last thing that we want to hear is about your interaction with your granddaughter. It doesn't make us have warm feelings towards you. It doesn't make us admire you. It doesn't make us change the page. You know what? You come across as one big, giant phony. That's what you come across as. If you listen carefully to what he said about diaper changing, he didn't say that he actually is changing any diapers. So again, he comes across as a big phony trying to take advantage of this cute little girl for his and his wife's political self-interest. Once again, just using people. And he's using the image of his granddaughter to create good feelings. Well, you know what, Mr. Clinton? It's not working. You were a pervert back then. You're a pervert now. And when it comes to your granddaughter, my preference is that you just shut up. And now we are going to go to our mailbag. Please feel free to write to me. I love receiving your letters. The email address is valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com. valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com. We get letters from around the country, and sometimes we get letters from around the world too, because this show is not only heard across the U.S., but it's broadcast on the internet, and therefore it is heard around the world. It is always a pleasure to get your letters. valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com. We have a letter, Greg from Long Island, New York. Dr. Grace, President Obama campaigned as a unifier, but I agree with you that his presidency has created a deep racial and social divide among classes. Yes, Greg. And what is utterly despicable, as I said last week, is that Republicans are taking on the language of class. It's one thing for the Democrats to use that language again and again, which I pretty much expected from them. But I'm always outraged when the Republicans take on the same talking points as the Democrats. I mean, even this week, when Mitt Romney was speaking in Mississippi, he went on and on about how, were he to run for president, which now we know he's not going to, he was going to craft policies that were going to be catered towards the quote-unquote middle class. And I find that really despicable. The president had said that we're not a blue state or a red state. We're not white or black. Well, you know what? We're not working class or middle class. We're not rich or poor. And that is a talking point that I would love to see a GOP candidate make. We should be one America, and we should take pleasure in everybody succeeding. We've got a letter by Aaron from Columbus, Ohio. Dr. Grace, stop blaming President Obama for the crisis in the Middle East and the outbreak of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Obama simply inherited President George W. Bush's weak foreign policy. Listen, Aaron, you are so on left field. You are so on left field because George Bush had a strong foreign policy, and he put us on a path towards victory. In fact, by the time Obama came to power, Iraq was stable and secure, and those are Obama's own words. And it is he who blundered, who dropped the ball completely, because he decided to pull out of Iraq. He was still on George Bush's timetable, but then he pulled out without leaving a residual force that his own military commanders told him would be necessary. Had he simply left that residual force, there would be no ISIS today. So the catastrophe that we are seeing is squarely at the foot of President Obama. He is totally responsible for it because in his egotism, in his arrogance, he completely ignored the sound advice of his commanders. Had he listened, Iraq would be today a model of democracy that would transform the Middle East, and George W. Bush would have been seen as the prophetic leader, as the skillful leader that he truly is. And I believe that the history books will vindicate George Bush and will be very unkind to President Obama. We have Ian from San Diego. Dr. Grace, powerful interview with Theodore Shubat. President Obama continues to be MIA in leading the fight against ISIS. What can America do to start gaining ground against this serious threat and the war on terror? Look, right now we have a grave problem, which is that our commander-in-chief does not really want to fight this war. He doesn't even want to identify Islamic terrorism by their proper name, because he's more concerned about defending the Muslims, the Muslim religion, than he is about actually protecting the citizens of the U.S. or the citizens of Western civilization. What can we do? Well, look, I was really impressed with Theodore Shubat. He leads an organization which is rescuechristians.org. And I think one thing that we citizens can do is we can help such an organization. They are helping Christians, whether they are Christian children who are orphaned, and to get them out of these war zones and into the homes of families that will love them. And they are also helping to build Christian militias there in the Middle East. So we may be really frustrated at our leaders, but one of the things we can do as citizens is we can try to help these initiatives which bring some kind of relief, some kind of hope to the Christians who are bearing the full brunt of this evil terrorism that is running roughshod all across Iraq and Syria. A letter now from William from Jackson, Wyoming. Dr. Grace, the President's State of the Union was like going to Disneyland. Yes, it was. And as I pointed out this week, even members of the mainstream media, the airhead media, have to agree. We've got a letter by Angie from Toronto, Ontario. Dr. Grace, American Sniper is the best movie of the year, and Michael Moore is a moron once again. Dead on, it is an absolutely outstanding film. And guess what? The recent Screen Actors Guild Awards, there was not a single nomination for American Sniper. What an outrage. And finally, the last letter. Lisa from Concord, New Hampshire. The unexplored story of American Sniper is the difficulties veterans have returning to civilian life. You know what, Lisa? You make a really, really interesting point, because it was a deranged veteran who ultimately killed this legendary hero. And there are veterans returning to the homeland who are suffering greatly, and they do not get the attention that they deserve. Thank you for that thought. This is Dr. Grace. Every week we will uphold values that will never die.
Here's what I tell everyone:
was born by God's dear grace in an extraordinary place.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.